Welcome to Leadership Unscripted. Today's episode is going to blow you away. I am super excited to be in Little Rock, Arkansas for my second visit here to meet with my good friend that I'm going to introduce to you in a second. We have the opportunity to just meet with some incredible leaders that are not only great leaders, but great innovators in the world of education. And what you're going to love and what you're going to hear today is another leader whose heart is about the student and the teacher. Dr. Oliva he's had every position you could imagine in education. He's going to talk about that a little bit. But he's currently the Secretary of Education here in Arkansas. He works closely with the governor and is extremely innovative. He's so methodical when you talk to him about how he wants to go about a strategy for education. And so today, as he talks, you're going to learn so much. You got to have your notebook out because you're going to learn so much about what they're doing in Arkansas and how they're leading the way in our nation when it comes to the next generation. So please welcome to the show, Dr. Oliva. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be here.
We were standing over here and I talked about one of the questions is around reform. I was like, I don't know if I like the word reform. You may like the word reform. But one of the things that I love that we've talked about you guys doing in Arkansas and just the research we've done is that you guys are thinking of new ways, right? Always of new ways to push the envelope of making sure the next generation is equipped, right, with a great education. How do you, when you do something like that, so you came from Florida and you came here, when you come in as the new guy, right, you come in with a kind of new ideas and new strategy. As a leader, talk to our audience about how you handle resistance in that, because every great leader that's doing anything is going to get resistance. How do you juggle that? How do you handle that?
Well, I think it's a great question. And I think anybody that's worked in education for some time, I've been doing almost 25 years, knows that there's this term in education called the pendulum.
Yeah.
It seems to swing back and forth, and what was good ideas are not good ideas, but then they come back to being good ideas. So over time, you learn that it's about engaging in a cycle of continuous improvement. And at the heart of all of this decisions we make each and every single day is about how do we provide more opportunities for students to be successful. And so as a newcomer coming into a state, literally came to an entire new state, a new organization by myself. I didn't bring anybody with me.
None of your staff.
None of my staff. I didn't bring one person with me. I just came in and said, I'm going to work with the talent that's here. And we're going to make sure we're working on the right work. Ultimately, I always like to say, if you're going to change a process or change a policy or change anything you do in education, when you're a principal, how you load kids on a bus and how you get them on the bus, how you decide who goes to lunch first, which textbook you're going to use, that's always a process. If you're going to change it, you got to be methodical. Look at a calendar. Does it make sense to change it during this time of the year? When would be a good idea to change policies or routines? And you got to look at the data. What data are you trying to move the needle on? And is this the data that we value or we know that's going to make our state better or our school districts better? And most importantly, you have to involve the people it affects. And if you stick to those three pieces about being methodical, data-driven, involving the people it affects, people can understand the need for change. And I've always found, whether I was a principal, superintendent, state leader, I'm always like to say, you have your speedboats, your tugboats, and your barges. If you can find who your speedboats are and get them outside about the work, they're going to bring our tugboats along. And once you have about 2/3 of the folks moving, you get that critical mass and eventually start moving those barges.
That's really good. And I mentioned earlier, you've been at so many different levels of education. Talk about how you got to Little Rock, because I think it's just great how you got here, right, to work with the governor. And in that, talk about along the way, what you've learned as a leader, like at each stop, and kind of going up the ladder there of your leadership.
Yeah, I get asked all the time, like, how do you become a Secretary of Education? And I always have to stop and think because it's not something that I ever aspired to do.
Yeah.
I always just wanted to be a good teacher and do good things for students. I started my educational journey in the classroom. I worked mostly with students in kindergarten to third grade who had been identified as special needs students. A lot of them had specific learning disabilities or dyslexia, and they were struggling to learn how to read. And that's where I cut my teeth. We were supporting an inclusion model where we want to see special ed students included in mainstream classrooms. And this is 25 years ago, and we're still struggling with that.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's always where my heart and my passion is grounded, is that these kids can do it. We as adults have to create the conditions for them to be successful. And all I wanted to do is is a good teacher. And I never thought about going into administration. And one day my principal said, "Hey, we're developing a pipeline for future leaders in our school district. And we talked with the superintendent, think you should be somebody that should get into that." And I was like, I never even thought about it. Right. You should meet with the superintendent and talk to him about that. I said, okay. So I met with the superintendent and he was telling me about the program. And he's, can you be done with your master's in it by next summer? And this was like in August. I was like, I guess. I did a expedited master's degree, doubled up on the course. I was like, I don't want to disappoint my principal or superintendent. And then that summer, I taught for some years and got moved into leadership, was an elementary principal. I got asked to be a high school principal, and all I wanted to do was a good job. And then I remember one day the superintendent asked me to come to the district office, and I was like, wow, I didn't even know that the superintendent knew my name. And I think, wow, there's a lesson to be learned is people are always watching. You're always being interviewed. You may not even realize that you're on somebody's radar for a future position or future opportunities. But if you wake up every day saying, I'm going to do what's best for students and for this district and for families, people are going to take note of that. And I was fortunate, got to be a school superintendent, and then started going to state level meetings and caught the eye of the Commissioner of Education in the state of Florida. And one conversation led to another. She said, come join the team and learn state level work, which I never once dreamed about. I didn't even know where the Capitol was. I remember going to Tallahassee. I was like, I don't even know how to find the Capitol. And turns out that I started enjoying state level work and getting a policy. And I think we did some incredible work in Florida. And I got to work with 2 different governors. And the Governor Sanders team reached out to me after their election, said, we want to do some big, bold initiatives in Arkansas and want to know if you'd consider joining our team because we're going to be #1 in education. I said, let's do it. And
She had you at big and bold.
big and bold right fast. I was like, I'm ready to go.
And so you landed here. Talk a little bit, because I love big and bold, because in Arkansas, you guys are big and bold. And one of those initiatives is really your anchor, the Learns initiative. Talk a little bit about the bigness and boldness of that, right? And then where you see that in 5 years, if you looked 5 years out and you would go, it was successful because, this.
Yeah. So in 2023, when we first started, and our first session started in January, so we hit the ground running. We were able to work with the legislature and pass a bill called the Arkansas Learns Act. And it was our framework for how we were going to realign the entire state. And I always like to tell people that bad systems beat good people every time. And we had good teachers, good principals, good elected officials working really hard for students, but the system was not aligned.
Right.
All of our early learning programs were all spread out through a bunch of different state agencies, depending on who funded them. They all had a different licensing process, a different definition of quality. It wasn't aligned. So we were able to bring all of early learning under our agency to set up one definition for quality, one policy for licensing, and make sure that we can provide access to every family that wants high quality childcare and early learning to improve kindergarten readiness. When we looked at our K-12 perspective, we had to realize that a one size fits all approach doesn't work for all students and families. And while many students might be on a highway to university, not all students are. And we need to create a system that has exit ramps and on ramps that embeds more current technical education, more concurrent credit opportunities, and make sure that when students are in our system, they're finding that pathway that works best for them. So we were able to build out high quality choice options. We developed a list of high demand, high wage, high credential areas that hadn't been developed. And then we had every high school now make sure they have 3 career and technical education programs that lead to licensing. And one of them has to be on that list. And we tasked schools with doing that in a year, and they were able to do it. We know that 3rd grade is a big number of determining if you're at a proficient level in reading, if you're going to be successful or enjoy your high school experience and maybe be successful beyond life. We doubled down on the science of reading in that space, improved quality and professional development, high quality instruction materials, updated our standards, built out a unified coordinated progress monitoring system. So we had one system that was based on criteria The state had previously had a college career readiness system that didn't give any information to schools and teachers about whether or not they were learning what we expected them to learn. So we've rolled all this out in about 2.5 years while making sure that those credits articulate to our local colleges and universities. So it was a comprehensive approach. We like to say it touched everything from cradle to career.
Yeah.
But it was important to expand choice options, empower families. And one of the biggest highlights is that we wanted to put teachers at the center of what we were doing. The most important predictor of a student's success is the teacher in front of them, in front of those students in the classroom. And we raised teacher salaries across the board to a starting salary of $50,000 across the state. I want to say it was like from 45th in the nation to top 5 in starting teacher pay, because we got to recognize, recruit, and retain our best educators.
You raised their salaries. Talk about your heart for the teacher, because you were one, right? And arguably you were a teacher in a difficult classroom in terms of what you had to do and the amount of time and effort you had to put into that. Not that all teachers don't do that, but for you, and when you were talking about special needs in those classrooms, talk about your heart for teachers and how you see, because I know you teachers more as leaders than teachers, right? Like you see the leadership in them. How do y'all communicate that to your teachers?
I think ultimately the teaching profession is the greatest profession of all professions. And it's important for us as a state. It's important for leaders. It's important for communities to stop and thank their teachers.
Yeah.
One of the things that would frustrate me the most when I was in a school district level or meeting with teachers and soliciting feedback and hearing about the profession is if I would hear a teacher say, I would never tell my own kids to be a teacher.
Right.
Something's wrong. We're not prioritizing and celebrating the best. So that's why you have to bring those great teachers to the table and say, how can we make your day-to-day better?
Yeah.
And what are the barriers that we can do to support you, to let you teach? And one of the things I think we sometimes get guilty of at a state level is we make it really hard to do just that. Teaching is not an easy profession. We should not be overcomplicating it. And one of our goals is to take back all this state level bureaucracy and mandates that don't improve student learning and focus on supporting teachers through innovation and letting them go. As adults, we need to get out of the way. And I used to say all the time that the best thing you can do as a principal is hire good teachers and get out of their way.
I love that. Let's talk about students. All right. You and I have had conversations, our team's had conversations with a lot of your team about character development. You and I have talked about how Little Rock, how Arkansas, the state of Arkansas, is extremely thirsty, the teachers are, for something for character development for their students. Talk about the importance of that for y'all in your initiatives and then the balance, because everybody's going to say they lead with education, reading, writing, arithmetic. You've heard that your whole life. Talk about the importance of character leadership development in the life of a student.
Yeah, so I think one of the voices we tend to overlook is that student voice.
Yeah.
And that's something I would remind like our state legislators, our school board members, our principals. It's okay to ask students about what they think and what their experience is. And I can tell you one of the things, like when I first got here and you talked about building the case for a need for change.
Yeah.
Everywhere I went when I first got here, I met with every superintendent across the entire state, went to all the school districts, and I would say, there's some national metrics that rank education 1 through 50. What's Arkansas? And people would guess. I was like, just tell me what you think we are. Nobody said number 1. Nobody said we were in the top 10. Everybody, it doesn't matter where I go. Probably 48, 40. And they're not wrong, because we've been ranked 43rd. Right. And I was like, I think we can do better than 43rd. 43rd shouldn't be good enough for us. But during that same spring of 23, when I first got here, I was able to meet with a group of students that were in a teacher preparation program in high school. These were kids that loved school so much that they were going to go to school to become teachers. And I asked them the same question, 1 through 50, where does Arkansas rank? And what I found is the students told us the same thing as the adults. First kid, probably 50, 48, 49. Now, the kids are telling us the same thing that the adults are telling us. There's a need for change.
Yep.
But what the kids are also telling us is they want a different experience that includes rigor, relevance, and relationships. And they were saying to us that there's sometimes a disconnect from what we're learning to how it applies to their and every day in every life. And when we would talk with the business community, we would ask them, what do you want to see out of our students? It wasn't that they took pre-calc. It wasn't that they passed their 10th grade literacy exam. They talk about those durable skills. Can students show up on time? Can they work in groups? Can they critically problem solve? Can they communicate effectively and tailor to the different audiences? And so it's important for us to remember that, yeah, content matters, right? Reading, writing, the basics matter. That's going to set you up for your pipeline for success. But building in those opportunities to develop durable skills is just as important. And I like to remind people that oftentimes those skills are developed in non-classroom or traditional settings. So when you're performing in a play, when you're on the marching band field, when you're in the football field, you learn how to get along with others. You learn how to problem solve. You learn how to think critically. And oftentimes we get budget cuts or new trends in our ideas, and those are the first things that we cut. And I always say those are the last things we need to cut, because that's where our kids are getting their most important.
That's so good. Yeah, and what I've learned, and my wife and I, when we first had our kids and they were going to school, I always used to lead with the parent-teacher conference, which sometimes doesn't even exist anymore, but it did back then. And one of the questions I would always ask is, my daughter, is she a leader in the classroom? I get the math and the English, I wondered, but is she a leader in the classroom? And that's what I wish we had more in education, which I love what you're saying, is that we were trying to raise up more leaders in the classrooms. Because when the student's leading and they can lead themselves and they can lead others, well, they're going to achieve a lot more. They're going to make better decisions. They're probably going to be more diligent in their homework. They're going to learn at a higher pace. And it's just something that is been absent, that I love the fact that it's at the heart of you and the governor and what you're wanting to do in Arkansas. It's really,
when they're going to feel like they're owning the learning process, and they're going to get excited to come to school every day. That's what you want, is you want students to walk in the door excited to be there and participating in a school and in an environment where the conditions are set for them to be successful.
That's great. This is not a question. 5 years from now, you're talking to a parent. You want to hear a parent say what about the state of Arkansas schools that their students went to?
Well, I think the most important thing that the parent's going to look at is, were they able to find a school that best fit the needs of their own child and their own family? And one of the things that we want to do is expand choice, but we don't want to have choice just to have choice. And we want to have high quality choice and high quality choice options. So I look back at my experience. I went to the public school system in Miami-Dade, big school system, proud product of the Miami-Dade public county school system. But when you look at choice options from my parents, it was pretty limited. It was go where the bus takes you or pay tuition at a private school. If you don't have a lot of money as a family, the only choice is go wherever that bus takes you. I think when we look at the educational landscape and opportunities for students and families now, it's so much more robust and dynamic, whether it's through the traditional public school, and even public schools are developing magnet programs and schools within schools to meet the needs of students and families. They're leading choice and innovation, virtual education, homeschool education, micro school, private school. There's so many options for students and families, so that if a parent says to me, hey, one thing that we've really noticed is, one, I can have access to high quality learning and childcare where we had deserts and islands before, but we figured out how to make sure any family that wants to participate can. And two, we found a place that works best for our child and they're thriving.
That's great, where they're thriving, right? That's what every parent wants to hear.
That's right.
That's what they want to see in their child. All right, so rapid fire questions, okay? If you could spend one full day with any leader, dead or alive, just the two of you, who would it be and why?
Probably pick Steve Jobs.
Okay.
I think of Steve Jobs and just his thoughtful attention to detail and his ability to think differently, which is a motto of Apple, to say, yeah, there's a status quo here, but we can do things not just differently, but better. And I like to think about that when I look at states and systems and schools and opportunities for students. Like, okay, what would the more creative people say about this experience? Like, we've had these systems and processes and procedures in place for decades. We're not moving the needle. So let's be bold. Let's be creative. Let's think differently and not be afraid to put anything on the wall and see what sticks.
I love that. All right. In your free time, which I know you, is about an hour a day, right?
Yeah.
I think you're working when you're sleeping.
Yeah.
You like to do what?
One place you might find me, if you don't find me in a school, is at a bowling alley.
Really?
I like to bowl. My family's a family of bowlers. And
Has this been forever?
Oh, since I was a teenager, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I still get out there every now and then, and
So a good bowler, huh? You got your little place in Little Rock that you can go and roll it, huh?
hang with the guys.
That's pretty great. I love
Do
that.
my best.
I love that. All right, last question. You look back on your leadership in 5 years. What do you want people to say about your leadership here in Arkansas?
I think I've been here almost 3. I always like to go at something where I would put myself out of a job. So if I can go in and find need, whether it's aligning systems or shaping policy or helping our school leaders think differently about the supports they're going to provide for teachers and students, that's the lens I'm going to come in. And then hopefully I can get to a point where I've realized my limitation, like capacity, and say, this organization is running. They don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
And I think I've arrived when, I don't know, actually, I don't think you ever arrive. I think you come to a point where you know you need another fresh set of eyes. You feel like you contribute everything you can.
That's good. I can tell you this, the state of Arkansas is blessed to have you as their leader in education, the way you think, how hard you work. I wasn't lying about it. I think he works in his sleep. The guy works. We just had a conversation earlier about travel, and this guy's working because there's a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of work.
We appreciate the partnership that we're starting to have, Maxwell Leadership and I Lead in Arkansas, and you're just leading the charge for that. And we see your heart for kids and teachers and the state, and you're an incredible servant leader and a great leader, and hopefully going to be a great friend for years to come. Yeah.
Love that.
I'm not a great bowler.
He's the perfect person to go.
Man, thank you. Thank you for being with us. I told you he was going to be fantastic. This is a level 5 leader. Do not listen to this on high speed because the guy gave you nuggets and gold. Make sure you write it down. You are not going to want to miss the next episode of Leadership Unscripted. I get the honor of sitting down with one of the greatest education leaders in America. This man knows how to lead. Don't miss it. You're going to be inspired. We want to thank you for joining us in this episode, and thank you,
Thank you.
Jacob. Appreciate you as well. Thank you.